I welcome all of you today. For this event, we get to welcome collectively the man credited with turning Volkswagen into the global powerhouse it is today. He is known to VW enthusiasts as Mr. Volkswagen. Please welcome former chairman, Mr. Karl Hahn. We're pleased to have Mr. Hahn here with us in the United States and also here at Berkeley-Haas. It's an honor to have him here. It's also an honor to hear about a lot of his perspective. As you know, this speaker series is very focused on leadership. He is a wonderful example of that, and also in particular the global perspective that he brings, not just on this industry, but on business more generally. I'd also like to welcome a special guest who's instrumental to our having Mr. Hahn with us here today. That is Trevor Traina. Trevor is Karl's nephew. He is a Haas alum, finished our MBA program in 1996. Trevor serves on our advisory board. He's been a longtime supporter of the school, often gives talks in our classes. Several of you may have heard him in the last couple of days. He gave a talk in our strategy and new technology markets just yesterday, in fact. His fields are marketing and entrepreneurship. I just want to thank you, Trevor, for helping us out more generally and also especially with making today happen. Our Dean Speaker Series, the last of the fall semester, will also be auto industry relevant. Retired Vice Chairman of General Motors and one of our alums, Mr. Bob Lutz, will be speaking to us here at Berkeley-Haas. That's Thursday, November 3rd. That's an evening talk at 7:30, and we'll be back here in the Wells Fargo room. Lutz has put out a book. Some of you may have read the book, seen the book, Car Guys and Bean Counters. It is a book that is very focused on what the auto industry might have done differently. And he's got some views on MBAs and business education. It'll be a wonderful talk. Today, we are going to be focused on leadership, the auto industry, as I said. We will be thinking about the background that we have here next to me and in this industry and all that he created and is still creating. He was born in Chemnitz, Saxony. He went on to study economics in Germany, also studied in Switzerland, studied in England, studied some political science in France. He received his doctoral degree in 1952 in Switzerland. His first work experience was with or for Volkswagen was as an assistant to the chairman. That was in 1954. He was 28 years of age. He rapidly advanced within the organization. Within 4 years, he was named president of Volkswagen America. He served as CEO of Volkswagen from 1959 to 1964. He helped create the legend, really the revolution in many people's eyes, that was and is the Volkswagen brand here in the United States. He was responsible for hiring the ad agency, Doyle Dane Bernbach, which created some of the most memorable car ads. Many of you will remember those. Also in the 1960s, the van that has become affectionately known, at least in California, as the hippie van, which was a fundamental introduction and still an image that we in Berkeley will hold dear. The ads have become cultural icons, the tremendous impact, and also recorded phenomenal sales that were not just because of the ads in 1960s and 1970s here in the U.S. He met his wife during his time in America. All 4 of his children were born here in the United States. After returning to Germany in 1965, he served as a member of the executive board and until he moved on to Continental AG in 1972. He returned to Volkswagen in 1982 as head of Volkswagen and served in that position for 11 years. In his time as chairman, he had an enormous impact on the auto industry, not only in Europe, where VW became Europe's largest automaker, but also, of course, worldwide. He led, for example, the purchase of the majority interest in the Spanish automaker SEAT and the acquisition of the Czech automaker Skoda. 1990, with the fall of the Iron Curtain, he changed the automotive landscape yet again, in this case in the former Soviet bloc, where he led Volkswagen's investments in the former East Germany. Perhaps most significant in making Volkswagen a global giant in the auto industry, the entry of Volkswagen into China, which under his leadership, Volkswagen was at that time the only active foreign automaker in China. He now serves as the former chairman of Volkswagen. In addition, he holds honorary seats on multiple boards in the US and, of course, in Europe. He's a regular lecturer at the University of Saxony in Germany and serves on the board of the Lauder Institute at the University of Pennsylvania, and also at the American School of Madrid, and a member of the European Automotive Hall of Fame. I could go on. Without further ado, let me begin our interview with this auto industry icon. Carl, thank you very, very much for being here. Let me start with some leadership thoughts, because you have important views and very experienced, developed views on leadership. Your own leadership style. If there are a few words that you use to describe your leadership style, what would those words be?
I certainly had no MBA background. I learned leadership as a soldier. I learned leadership when I had my first job in Italy with Fiat.
Yes.
And I learned important for leadership is to convince and to be a politician. And when you have a company the size of Volkswagen with hundreds of thousands of people, the important thing is that you not just communicate with your next in line, but that you travel around the world and campaign for your strategies. And try to instill all over the world the conviction that, number one, your strategy is right, hopefully then supported by success, and number two, that everybody in the company has an equal chance, whether he is 10,000 miles from headquarters and has X passport or Y passport at the headquarters. So you try to communicate nevertheless that you have so many people, and that business gets so complex, and you shouldn't have time for what I just said, as you are constantly in front today of decision making. With the speed of technological change and the shorter and shorter lifespan of your products, of course, you constantly have to look around, and you not only have to cater in your leadership for what is happening in your places. You go to your dealers, of course, not for a show, but unannounced. You drop by maybe late at night here in a dealership somewhere in Utah or wherever it is, and you go into his showroom and you wander around what's happening. You look around and you see what's happening, and you go in an auto show and you sit in cars of your competition and you listen what people say. And you go in your own cars and listen what people say. So leadership has a very great number of elements which bring you close to the realities of the market and the competition. And it is as important as knowing the market is to know the thinking of your competition.
Wonderful example. You know, people talk a lot about organizations getting flatter and flatter. This is one way of making sure you stay in touch, huh? With all layers.
And to have the right degree of decentralization at the same time, as of course, as you know from Volkswagen, we bring now different cars to the cars we bring to the Europeans, not only to the United States, but also to China and other parts of the world. We might find out that these different cars are also liked by the Europeans, as we have given the Europeans so far cars we like most ourselves in their handling and all that. But that's a different question when you talk about cars with Americans.
Yes, yes. You mentioned you mentioned selling your strategy. Could you say a few words about why you can't just announce the strategy?
In a big organization with today intellectual level of people you hopefully have hired, and not just yes men and yes women, you must convince them in order to motivate them as they will execute your strategy. They have to believe in your strategy in order to live your strategy and to live your philosophy, to live your culture. As these things go together, your strategy is part of your culture and your philosophy, and consequently, if you just give by the order of Mufti an email to everybody nowadays, or in the old days just whatever letter you might send out through your underlings, this is not enough, as this will get lost in communication. You don't want that this is being lost. You want to convince the last man in Argentina or in China and in South Africa about your strategies. Of course, it's more difficult in China by language reasons and so on to get to the last worker. But it's already important when you get to your management team in China and bring it on your side.
Well, lovely example. Lovely example. The culture of Volkswagen, are there a few things that you think of at the top of that list when you think of the...
We had always, number one, a great love for engineering, sometimes too much. That's part of our culture. And we still keep the too much as part of our philosophy. We have, of course, we try to practice being the advocate of your customer and anticipate your customer. And number three, as a Volkswagen culture, you try to have a certain atmosphere. To tell you an example of what means Volkswagen culture, when I had to close Westmoreland factory here for cost and other reasons, I had years thereafter workers who had been fired writing letters to me at Christmas saying how great it was to work for us. That's a story.
Great story. Great story. Advocate of the customer. That's a wonderful phrase. Wonderful phrase. How about, we have so many, whether at the Lauder Institute or here, obviously part of what we want to do is select people with big capacity, potential for leadership. And also they're making decisions while they're here about what they might do a little more of in order to develop leadership potential. Any thoughts along those lines? What suggestions would we give students to become stronger leaders while they're here?
In today's world, I think you must be at home in this world. As the world is one marketplace, which is easily said, but in reality it is, of course, millions of different marketplaces. But you must be, as a future manager, in whatever capacity, in whatever country you are in, you must feel at home by own experience in this world. And I recommend everybody, number one, you must speak languages beyond your English. Not just French for ordering a menu, but you must live and learn the complicated languages, unfortunately. And this means Chinese, of course, and Russian, and Portuguese or the Spanish, and that's easy here for you in California to learn Spanish. But you must also, before the age of 30, 35, have had a practical experience. You must have, not as a visitor, coming to your subsidiary and living in a hotel and going to offices and talk with people. You must have been living in these countries. You must have had the feel for the human beings here. You must get then a much different and better judgment to be a manager, and this is, or manager, how you say for a lady manager. We are very delicate in Germany, and we have always to emphasize the two sexes. Yes. No, it is a matter, you must be at home in this world, and you must like it, what you do. And if you have these elements, I think you have a precondition for being successful, to be integrated and to be a useful element. You will like to be hired by a company who is acting and operating globally and consequently needs people who can think globally, have the fantasy to communicate with people of different races, background, and political systems even, when you think of China or Russia and so on.
And increasingly, a lot of these firms are telling people very straight, look, you can't aspire to the top jobs unless you've had experience in multiple geographies, right? I mean, this is
that's one prerequisite for being on the advancement trail. Otherwise, you will not, in most companies, be the right man, the right woman for the job.
Yes,
that's obvious.
Yes. And we had a very short conversation before coming in here about business schools generally. And we talked a little bit about German business schools and others. And you had mentioned that some of the reasons why German business schools hadn't advanced as quickly as in some other places. And it relates to something I wanted to ask you about, which is innovation, sort of how quickly. And could you talk about those business schools, but also link to this larger question of how we innovate as a people or a country?
Well, we were many, many years behind in business schools for the reason that also the scale of our business was much smaller. Europe was such a segmented, small country-by-country affair. Management had not these requirements and American mass markets had for the last 100 years. So we talk about two completely different sets, which permitted me to learn a lot when coming to America. And we had not this type of business school at all. We were completely separated and we learned things we never used then in our practical life. And we have also certain nations who have taught over too long the world many good things. We in Germany were just not accustomed to learn from others. And this was a great handicap to find out that the Japanese are not only producers of junk and are lying all the time, but that they are very honest and very creative and very spirited competitors as an industrial nation. We had a long, long time to learn this, and this all delayed a lot these processes. We have also relatively few Germans who go abroad to business schools, which I also consider as a handicap for us. We improved now, but I wonder how many Germans are here in the room. 1, 2,
Two or three.
3.
Yeah.
That's already a lot. That's already a lot. I'm not accustomed to this, but no. I must say we had this handicap, and when we got into trouble by these unnamed, just named companies and countries, we finally turned around and found out how much more important it is and how much more profitable it is to open up and to find out that you can do everything in the same German quality abroad. And to mention Mercedes, they never dreamt of producing a Mercedes outside Germany. As the customer insisted upon it, it must be made by Germans, as nobody else can do it. Well, it's now done by Africans in South Africa, it's now done by Americans, it's done by everybody wherever they go. And they have problem to catching up. But when I take other companies like mine, we have the same quality in Changchun, when we produce an Audi there as we have in South Africa or we have in Germany or wherever. So there is no difference anymore. It's a matter of management, what your quality is. A matter of your philosophy, what your engineering is, how much you invest in engineering. Of course, Americans unfortunately invest a lot in shareholder value, which is the reason that we have seen the disappearance of American industrial strength in the world. As the thinking was radically wrong oriented, the entire system didn't work the way I tried to tell my colleagues on American boards, but I wasn't very successful except in one company. But apart from this, it is just a matter of, in today's world, that you must also within a company mobilize the intellectual potential. And this you can only when in each country where you operate, you give equal opportunity to everybody you hire. And when you do this, you will also get and attract the best people, as you give these people then to come with your company around the world, to get to unique experiences. And with these unique experiences, when you mix these people, you will have an enormous degree of creativity and will be ahead of your competition. And I think this is a matter always of team building, of international teams, which make it that you can advance faster than your competition. And we have, when you think of Steve Jobs, you have Americans who do this in the most fantastic way, but they produce then their products in China. And this is another problem we must avoid to a certain degree.
I love, you know, I wrote it down here. It's a matter of management, what your quality is. And that's
100%. A matter of philosophy, of your eye, of running around. I see as a hobby, instead of a pen, my successor at Volkswagen, he carries a pen like this, and as a hobby, wherever he goes, he puts it on the sheet metal and measures the depth of the color, of the paint, in order to see whether this car has enough paint or not enough paint, and whether it's our own car or whether it's somebody else's car. He's just bothering people with his hobbies. And he is constantly on the alert. This you have to be. You are never, unfortunately, when you are a manager in the global world today, in the evening you will never be have finished with your work. It will always go on. And you go home, feel a little bit bad that you already go home at this late hour, but the world is speeding along at Formula One speed, only with the difference that the race never ends. And that's a big difference. You are never secure.
And the auto industry, if I could transition there, sort of a broad question, the state of the auto industry, does it look and feel healthy to you?
Well, the auto industry will go from cars from 600 million on the earth to 1 billion in the next 20 years. And we have an enormous expansion, which will see a lot of people dead by the roadside for a reason that this expansion is taking place, not certainly in the US or in Europe, but excuse me, in places in Asia, in Brazil, and partially in Russia also. And as a consequence, unless you are in a country like China, you will not reach the competitive size which is necessary tomorrow and today to afford the engineering investment, the research investment which is required in all industries. And as China is already today the largest market by far and the largest market for our company, for instance, unless you are in this market, you will not be able to survive, as your numbers will just not be sufficient. And this is the enormous change we are facing in the years to come, that in China itself, when the Chinese go in the foreseeable future to produce 30 million automobiles a year, we are now at 60 in the world. Well, by then we will be at 90. But nevertheless, the Chinese, of course, will, like the Koreans, show a great deal of creativity, like they have shown the world over 4,000 years only. And as a consequence, we will have to be on our toes, and we will have, of course, we have in China the same R&D facilities. We have in Germany the same test tracks to make everything comparable in order to be ready not only for the Chinese market, but also for the mutual inspiration which come from this tough competition. Of course, every engineer in Skoda in the Czech Republic wants to show the Germans that he is a better auto engineer with a greater tradition. So this is an enormous incentive, and the Chinese will show certainly the same to us. So we will have a completely new set of, number one, intensity of competition, but you will have also a completely new set due to the explosion of the width of research you have to do. You have, in the years to come, invest more than ever before in gasoline technology, in diesel technology, and nevertheless you will have to invest in other technologies on the electrical side, in many, which cut down your diesel volume and your gasoline volume, but at the same time force you to do more, as this is still the majority for the next 15 years, 20 years, of your product. And the possibilities of cutting down consumption, environmental issues, and performance is of course enormous. The same is, of course, with the electric car and its cost strategy and all what goes with it, hopefully also not with coal-powered power stations, coal-fired power stations, so that you are really getting an advance in the environmental areas. But the greatest thing is that today we are in the middle of an explosion of R&D in the auto industry. And this, of course, will force companies like Mercedes to go together with Renault and Nissan. Who would ever have thought that they would get together in bed? Nobody. And
because of these economies of scale and the research.
The economies of scale and the larger and larger width of your program that you have as a luxury manufacturer to offer a small car, a medium-sized car, a big car, and you have as a volume manufacturer also to offer a small car, a mid-sized car, and even a big car, and a tiny, tiny car in all sorts, and the fully electric automatic cars. And we have also the revolution, of course, in safety and all these other elements. And this is, of course, a constant increase of what is happening in these areas. And the German automobile industry is 50% of total research in Germany.
Is that right?
That's, of course, very important in the repercussions for the rest of the industry.
This industrial research.
Of course, the supply industry also.
Could you say you mentioned China, and when you brought Volkswagen into China, it was a very different place. Can you cast back and think a little bit about...
Well, it was a different place, but I must say I was convinced by the communist leaders of China for, in particular, one thing. They were sending their children to America, to university. And I thought this is the best insurance policy that China will stay on this track. It was not guaranteed, but to give you an amount, we made a lot of effort. And the first year we registered in China 1,700 cars. We had a market share.
Which year?
In 1983. We had a market share of 24%. And today we have to register more than 2 million cars in order to have a market share of 20%. So our business has changed, but we believed in the communist government, and I consider the Chinese government not a government. I consider the Chinese government a management team. And only thanks to their entrepreneurship and understanding capitalism are they, over so long, so successful that unfortunately, in many ways, they are more successful in these areas as we. As I remember our delegations we have sent to China, warning the Chinese of the breakdown of their banking system. And we are now talking also about things of this matter and these consequences. But basically, China has done something in a proportion which never happened before. And also internationally, politically, I think they have done a great job. And I think the Communist Party is just a wrong name for a very successful organization, which might not be democratic, but I wonder who in China is really so keen on democracy when he remembers his grandfather starving of having no food and a miserable life. So they have enormous progress, and I see now also that, of course, the Chinese have been helping us to get out of the 2008 recession, which was, I think, without the Chinese, it would not have happened. So all told,
in which respect can you?
All told, the Chinese leaders are having, according to McKinsey, the best personnel system of getting good people to the top. And when you look at their professional government, I have the impression that, of course, there are mistakes too, but that the prime ministers and presidents we have seen in the years past, since I started there with Jiang Zemin and so on, it was a always very successful and smooth team. We worked very closely with them, as we were their politically most important case. Automobile is very visible and plays accordingly a special role. and the communist leaders were very close to us. I got together with them on a monthly basis. They were talking with me about that our horn is not strong enough, that we had squeezing door hatches, and we were just talking about business and down to earth, and they were helping in getting our nationalization up. They brought us part of the armament industry, and so on and so on. And I still remember from Zurongji, when he sent in these days telex, I want no new telexes, I want new higher percentages of national content. And he sent people and put pressure and so on and so on. So, yes. A long story, it was possible to build from scratch from these 1,700 vehicles we assembled and we didn't produce. It was possible to build today a very good automobile industry, which will be playing in the world markets as try in 2020, and will enter a new competitive category in the world market, no doubt, like they have done in other markets already.
Not politicians, but managers. I mean, that's really a very important point.
They are
right?
a management team, as I must say. They said, in my days, I talk now about where I saw it last in the year 2000. In the year 2000, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China consisted of, one exception, only engineers. And today, the Minister of Science of China, Wang Gang, a former Audi employee in Germany, he became Minister of Science at a time when he didn't have had yet the decency to be even a member of the Communist Party. I consider this very impolite.
I love it. Lutz's book. Can I ask you about Bob Lutz's book? So that
I know him very well. Yeah. I congratulate you. You will like him. He is one of the most colorful and most successful and entrepreneurial men we have in this industry. And he has been given America what General Motors was lacking over too many years with too many financial guys and bean counters. And he has left traces also with BMW. He was Vorstand of BMW and other companies, Ford in Europe and so on. He has a lot to tell you.
And so the broad, for those who haven't seen the book, it's, you know, the broad hypothesis is there are people, oversimplifying, who have a passion for cars, for the product, for the customer, and those that are analytical bean counters, too often trained in business schools, etc. And so some of that rings true, obviously.
Well, you know, it's not the bean counter, it's overemphasizing the shareholder and not to take the stakeholders. And the shareholder value discussion, which is influencing your bonus, has given such a short-term thinking to management in America. I mentioned this before. And this is what has slowed down General Motors. Ford was slightly better and did get better though the crisis. But it's a pity that we didn't have, since Ed Cole, an engineer at the top of General Motors. And in these days, General Motors was, of course, with almost 50%, the leading spirit of the market. And the pride of the country, and so on and so on. So he is right when he talks about this not enough spending for the long-term future, and this you can only do via R&D. And this has been slowed down in America and has been one of the key problems we have.
Some of that, people argue, is the result of public equity markets, the pressure from public equity markets, right? So it's not, it's perhaps a deeper problem than just enlightened management.
Yeah, there is a pressure, but we never had this pressure, and I wonder why we didn't have the pressure in Europe. And we were never talking about profit per share and things of this nature. We were just talking about how to maximize our cash flow in order to maximize our expansion. And this was to us the key element of our strategy in order to move so fast. I mentioned, and I didn't mention, that we are the most important automobile factory of the world, ever started by the British Army in 1945. And we started at 0. And today we are number 3 in the world. And I know all the mistakes we have made on the way. I can't believe it, as I don't know all the mistakes of our competitors. And this is why you have always the wrong vista when you know too much about your problems, but not enough about the problems of your competitors and their thinking. But apart from this, we have been growing miraculously, but we didn't have this influence of Wall Street. We had a much less aggressive shareholder. Maybe we were protected by these banks who were in a very strange situation. It would take Phil a week to explain. But this helped us to be that everybody was happy when we paid 10 D-mark dividend per share, and the rest we did the way we thought best, and so on. So we had, of course, also great advantage in shaping our balance sheet, which helped us to hide profits and keep cash flows and finance our expansion there, consequently, much more than others in other countries.
Thank you. We want to make sure people have a chance to ask questions. We'll have another 15 minutes or so. Let me, you mentioned banks. Could I just get I realize we're all reading the same newspapers, but are you optimistic about Europe's financial efforts over the next couple of months?
I don't know. I think nobody can know, as we have, unfortunately, a weak government in almost every country. And we have one financial market, totally integrated, and we have different governments at different places intervening. Of course, this is an enormous handicap, and we certainly need a higher degree of integration in Europe. This will be very difficult, as we must realize that Europe is not melted together like the Europeans in America and building a new nation. We are different nations still with very different interests and histories and so on and so on. So this will be a very difficult time we are going to have. Germany is supposed to save Europe. We are a tiny country compared to the rest of Europe, and we have also more debt than we should. And we should not say that only the Greeks are to be blamed for terrible things, but the Spaniards and the Italians and the French and the Germans as well, except the Estonians, who have the best disciplined management at the present time in terms of financing, for sure. So it is very hard to predict this, but I even look with one eye to China when thinking about how to solve our problems, as China is the least indebted country and has the best growth rates and will play a fundamental role also in future, not in the near future, as they are also a little bit slowing down, but I think there are opportunities, and this might help us in Europe to get out of the mess. You will know better than I what mess we are in here. We have not paid for the wars. We have war on credit, and we have systems which are definitely with an amount of debt which has exploded in the last 20 years more than since the foundation of the United States. So we have gone here also in printing dollars on paper. We have, since the famous Plaza days in New York, when we abandoned the gold standard, we have in America lived politically in a very irresponsible way as far as the finances and the country are concerned, I feel. And we have done the same in Europe for political reasons, always, in order to buy electorate. And that's, of course, something we are now going to pay probably for the next 10 to 20 years, hopefully not longer.
10 to 20. We'll go to questions. Well, I have one more quick question. And if you think about, just narrowly, if you think about Volkswagen and you think about the introduction of the euro some 12 years ago, on a scale of 1 to 10, was having the euro rather than the national currencies, is that a good, has that been a good thing for Volkswagen?
I don't have to say for Volkswagen. It was a price Germany had to pay against the French for reunification. And we had to give away the D-Mark. And the Germans resent this, of course, till today. But the euro is an integrating factor.
Yes.
We have made enormous progress that thanks to the fall of the wall. It was not the reunification of Germany, but of Europe. And the European integration is, of course, the backbone of the European political future and economic system. Without this, we would have no future in the world of today. So we have to defend the euro, as otherwise we would disintegrate. And we have consequently to do what is politically right. Whether this is for Volkswagen 1 to 10, I couldn't even tell you. We have certainly not suffered under the euro as of today. It has brought us great advantages in not having foreign exchange costs for 40% of our business. It's just great for every European going on vacation to Italy and paying with the same money he pays his grocer at home. It's a great advantage. Of course, for the Italian, who had, with the lira, getting a mortgage to pay 15% interest, and overnight with the euro he was at 5. Of course, this led then the governments to be negligent and to forget the realities. And this brought us the problem we are in today, that again, for political weakness, we make too many concessions and are not what you expect every single citizen to be, namely to spend what he makes and not more.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Let's go to questions from the audience. Please use the microphones because we are capturing this on the video. Anybody has a question, you can also line up behind the microphones if a couple people have questions. Please.
Shall I ask the first question?
Hi, guten Tag. You briefly touched upon the design and the creative work being done by Apple here, and but the manufacturing is moved to China. So could you elaborate, like, what other means in terms of the cost impact, in terms of the cost considerations that we have in this global world? What other means that we could follow in terms of manufacturing and design in the Western world and not going to China or India?
I think we have to go everywhere where our customers are. And this includes, of course, India, I didn't mention, but India is coming now along in an outstanding way and has many advantages over China due to its colonial time. And we have one big problem in our industry. We should not over-centralize. And given the myriad of products we have, and there will be more products coming, we cannot, in a centralized way, we must have in our enterprises a decentralization of jobs also in R&D. And this is why we have R&D and design centers between Argentina and Mexico, and between South Africa and Spain, and between Škoda in Czech Republic and in Hungary, as well as several ones, as a matter of fact, 2 in China. I didn't mention that we have 2 bases in China. We were not only the first one in China, but then when there was a second option in Changchun with the today biggest truck factory in the world, FAW. We also were fighting for Changchun, which was very simple, as nobody in the world believed in the Chinese. And we had 20 years in the China alone. So if I understood your question right, we have also today an engineering center coming up in India. We have everywhere we need engineers and their intellectual capacities. And the Indians have shown in many good examples of this.
No, I was more from the perspective, I understood that manufacturing should also be done probably in the Western world, and we shouldn't be going, doing the design or the creative work here and going to China or to other low-cost countries. So that's what I understood.
Well, partially, you will always go also abroad, but I think one should always maintain an industrial base. I think it has a lot of advantages. Also for, this doesn't apply to electronics, but in all mechanical engineering, it's always almost a need that you have also the experience of manufacturing. How you distribute the manufacturing in total over the world is something which is related to the markets and the structures you have. This is no recipe, but I'm a strong defender that also in high-cost markets, you try to get the cost down, which is a job you must do. Anyhow, as I mentioned, the cost in our discussion, we have today in Shanghai costs in our engine plant, which are similar to the costs in our engine plant in Poland. So there is already now in China coming an adjustment of wages upward. You know that the Chinese have gone from, I think, they have increased their consumption ratio from 27% to 35%. So we see already in China now the home market coming along at very, very good speed. And this will mean at the same time higher and higher incomes for people. And this is progressing as this is needed and as the Chinese can afford without making mistakes in paying too high wages. Notwithstanding that at the present time they have a slight inflation problem for many reasons, which are not directly related to local cost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, please. Thank you.
Hi, you mentioned that you started as an assistant, or in the introduction, you started as an assistant, and then within 4 years, it was already a significant jump. And I just wanted to hear a little bit of detail of what happened in those 4 years to really create that sort of progression.
Well, I was the assistant to the chairman, and in these days, the chairman had so many decisions to make, he didn't need an assistant. We found out, and I wanted to leave, and then he offered me a job to be in export promotion. And I got also tired in export promotion, so they found out, they sent me to America. America was a tiny market. Nobody thought it had any future, and everybody thought I was foolish. And I went to America, and I had two very important advantages. I had the freedom to run the company and to have only in 5 years one board meeting. My other advantage was everybody from headquarters could telephone me, provided he had the written consent of the chairman. For overseas calls, you needed the written consent of the chairman, as in these days they were as expensive as a ticket by American Airlines to Frankfurt today as a call. So we were a tiny company, 500 cars a day. Today it's 30,000. And in these growth companies, you can advance fast. They had nobody to send to America. I had never been to America. My only American experience was a prisoner of war camp in Ingolstadt, Germany, whereas today Audi. And I learned apparently very fast to get to know and to understand America. And I loved it. And I did a lot of things which had not been done before. standardized buildings, strict legal, not legal, but management requirements, investment requirements for our dealers. We had an enormous degree of discipline of what should be done and not done, and training, and we got also a good number of German mechanics to get our service business in order. So we became a very fast-growing company. When I came, we had sold 70,000 cars. When I left, we had sold 600,000. So we were obviously the darling of America. This I owe to Detroit, as Detroit in these days had a policy of constant change, but not to the better in terms of engineering and value, but only optical change. And the American consumer was somehow under a very stupid pressure. And there was also stupid advertising by stupid advertising agencies with great names. And I went to an advertising agency billing $2 million. They had Orbach's, Israel Airlines, and this instant photography company. Well, yeah. So, and we, with this company, were introducing our thinking, which was very clear messages. And we were always bringing our messages with a lot of humor in a way which we then have brought all over the world. And I think it has never happened before on Madison Avenue that with our advertising agency I have signed up in '59. 50 years later, we celebrated 50 years of collaboration. This spirit has remained, and they were just fitting our philosophy of a car which doesn't change for the reason of change, only for the benefit of the consumer. And this philosophy was very much liked by the Americans. We became the darling of America, besides our bus, which introduced a new type of transportation for various segments in the market place. So this somehow brought me, you had, when you were surviving in my age group, World War II, you had the advantage of advancing fast, as many of your colleagues had died in war, you know? So we could move much faster than it is normally the case. Today the world for you is completely different from this. It's much more complicated and complex and much more demanding, I must say, as it is much more complex.
Could you say a few words about thank you for that question, your appreciation for marketing and branding and things that are not always associated with engineering?
I learned my first experience of branding was I was working in Frankfurt in 1945 as some young 19-year-old and lousily dressed, and I had 2 hours before I had a chance to jump on a train. And I was walking up and down, and I saw at a sudden sign, U.S. Army Coca-Cola bottling plant. Well, I rang the bell. Somebody opened the door in a uniform, and I told him I would like to visit your factory. He said, please come in. And he brought me to a room, please sit down, and here you have a bottle of Coca-Cola. We will be right away with you. And this gave me an enormous idea how these people were thinking. These were, of course, all camouflage Coca-Cola people. Yeah. But how could they take a young guy who looked like nothing and waste their time with him and handle him in such a way that he talks about it today? And well, branding is, of course, something you learn in America. You must learn by instinct, and you can learn also by professors very well, I think, that this is the most valuable thing. But first of all, when you brand, you must know what your brand should be, what your character should be as a product, and what your philosophy, what your segments will be, and is this something you cannot change. Brand is stability, and as a consequence, you must be, and we are now champions in branding Seat, in branding Porsche, in branding Skoda, in branding VW, in branding Audi. Audi was my first job when I saved Audi, when we had bought Audi in 1964. I was just new on the board and found out we were losing money, and we were ashamed, and we thought we just produced Volkswagens, as we always had not enough capacity. And then I fought for Audi, as I thought this would be our upgrade one day. Okay, so we had in all these vehicles, when you take the difference between a Porsche and a Lamborghini and a Bentley, you wouldn't see in the Bentley that it has the platform of a Phaeton, and that in the Lamborghini you have the same engine you have in the R8 you have. So it's a matter of very carefully mixing, on the one hand, your modules in order to capitalize on your many brands. You know, we couldn't afford, like Jaguar, to have an 8-cylinder, 12-cylinder only for Audi. But when you have them for so many brands, and the 6-cylinders for so many brands, and the 4-cylinders, and you can change them a little bit, and the 3-cylinders, and the 2-cylinders now, then you have on the one side brands, and under the skin, with a different skin, different character, fitting perfectly, the pride of the Czechs, fitting perfectly. We were not all the time successful with Seat. We made some stupid mistakes on the way and had to pay for them. But for the other brands, we had always an enormous differentiation, character, and we pronounce that Skoda is a Slavic Czech company with Slavic engineers, with Slavic teams, and they have the advantage of using our modules, our R&D structures, but they have enough independence to also annoy Volkswagen by lots of success. Now in China, for instance, overnight, Skoda went from 0 to 300,000 cars this year probably, or 250, as much as it can produce. So this branding is something which is very, very dangerous, but I think this you can learn here in the school.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Thank you for saying that. He was not told to say that. I just wanted to give very quickly, because we have to wrap up, but I have a picture here. You can probably see a little bit of the picture. This is a Volkswagen Beetle, a Bug. It's circa, I'm going to guess early 60s, or right?
1960.
60. So this is the ad with a picture of the Bug, and right there's one word underneath it in large type in the font. It says lemon is what it says. And then the ad reads, "This Volkswagen missed the boat. The chrome strip on the glove compartment is blemished and must be replaced. Chances are you wouldn't have noticed it. Inspector Kurt Kroner did." And then it goes on and talks about, right, their attention to quality and control, and obviously an enormous brand. Carl Hahn, we thank you very, very much for being here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.